Hey there, welcome to this fully narrated real-time tutorial where I'm going to take you through my process for creating this fantasy illustration where we've got this little goblin guy riding on this cool creature. This is going to be an opportunity for me to show you how I do this real-time unedited. Let's get started. Alright, my name is Tim McBurney and I've been a professional artist for 20 years and a professional drawing teacher for 10 years. And I'm here to help you draw cool stuff from your imagination, to embrace the challenge of drawing, and to master the craft of line and color illustration. Now, if line and color illustration is something that you're interested in, and you like this comic book, manga, bande dessinée style where we create worlds with simple line and color, go check out my free quick start guide that goes over exactly the same process that I'm going to use for this image, but in a little bit more of a simple step-by-step process, and I give you a lot of tips and insight into how I think you can best start to learn and approach creating images in this style. You also get all the brushes and templates and actions and other things that I tend to use. Alright, let's jump in. Okay, so the goal here that I have, again, you have seen the image, because again, that's the way the magic of editing works, because I have no idea what it's going to look like yet. But I've sort of, in my head, what I want to do is take this little creature here that I've got, which I kind of call like a Birdfox, because in my mind it's sort of a bit of a mix of like a flying little fox rodent thing and a bird. I didn't really like how the little goblin guy turned out. I much prefer this one that I drew. So I'm going to try and use a combination of these two images basically and create a new image with a different pose. That's my plan anyway. We'll see how we go. Again, you know what it sort of turned out like, because it would be sort of part of the intro. So again, I sort of have an idea for how this will work, but not 100%, right? Like not 100%. That there's still a few things that obviously are going to be up in the air. So again, I do the initial sort of sketch in a variety of ways. A big part of it is just kind of having a pencil that's sort of loose, right? So something that is going to allow me to kind of make sure that I know I'm not creating sort of finished lines. Now, basically this sort of creature, right? I'm imagining something sort of pretty simple, sort of somewhat similar to the other one, right? We got like this sort of creature on a branch, and we got our sort of goblin character on top. But again, exactly how that happens, I'm not sure. Just gonna sketch around and see what happens there. I've just got these three sort of spheres, right, that are really representing the kind of creature. We've got the rib cage, we've got the ball of the head, and we've sort of got the ball of the hips, and it's really just a matter of sort of placing them in an interesting way, right, and looking at that sort of depth. Now again, I'm feeling like this guy is probably a little bit high up, right? So we're probably going to have to move it down or scale it up. Again, digital's good with that. So again, we've got that sort of skeleton. Shoulder blade, upper arm, lower arm, sort of hand, right? And we can do the same thing here. Again, this one up here could potentially be, again, a lot more compressed on the other side there. And I'm doing this with a fairly low opacity. And again, that just allows us to keep building up. So again, these sketches are going to be pretty sort of rough. They're not really for, again, sort of showing. These are sort of exploration, right? So again, I'm placing things and figuring out what goes where. So in this case, you've got hip, upper bone, upper leg bone, lower leg bone, and then you sort of got the foot. That's typically how these kind of things work. Except here we're not going to have a huge foot, because if you look at that original one, that original sort of drawing, there's not a huge foot there. And because it is that sort of flying fox, right? Sort of like what the other thing would be, like a sugar glider, or one of those little rodent sort of creatures that has skin between its sort of limbs that it kind of uses to glide from tree to tree. Again, I'm trying to make that skin is going to sort of create some interesting shapes. Again, that wasn't fully part of the original design, but that's something that I was just interested in playing around with here. So again, I think this, in order to get that front leg to be a bit further forward, just got to move that a bit. Again, move the leg, the bone in there. So again, still got that rib cage coming up there, and so I guess the feeling I'm getting is that, yeah, this thing probably needs to be a bit smaller. So doing some cheaty twisting. Trying to just looking at the original design, trying to check that reference, see if that can work think these legs need to be a bit bigger at the back. Just thinking about what's going to happen with that. Not sure about this head. Again, that kind of kite shape is a really good animal sort of drawing technique. Kind of represents where that sort of structure of the sort of eyes and everything's going to be. It obviously doesn't fit at all for the bird that I'm sort of creating, but I do find that is a really handy little idea. And I think that again, that's like comes from a particular school of animal drawing. So, getting this a particular type of animal bird thing that we had in that original sketch. He had this kind of like inbuilt smile that I thought was kind of cool, and there was like again like a nice simplicity to that design which sort of did work. There was something about it where, again, sometimes that just like initial first little design kind of works, right? Again, important to get like a mix of sort of bird-like and animal-like. So a bit of sort of feather, a bit of fur. Not quite sure what it is. And so again, I'm still learning how this works. Yeah, I feel like that's better. It's a bit, the face is a bit longer than I'm imagining. And yeah, you know, I might, if this was a character I'm sort of designing and really sort of looking at, you know, just keep doing illustrations and trying to sort of put them into different situations and see what happens. And he had this kind of tongue. Obviously, it's going to have a nose or something there. Again, I'm not sure whether that whole head is a bit too big. So again, it'd be good to show some depth with like a tree or whatever's going on here. So I'm not really thinking about any sort of, you know, formal composition or anything like that. Again, we'll see how things kind of turn out. Obviously there's some good diagonals, right? Like that is always going to help. And similar to the other one, right? We'll have a bunch of big leaves and things, because the idea is this guy is quite, these look quite small. And probably even the other illustration was quite quick. I'll just bring it down again so you can remember. Oh, let's get out of full screen here. So this one still was pretty, like, you know, a pretty rough sort of thing. This one will probably be sort of rougher still. Again, the goal is really just to sort of play around drawing these characters. See, like, how big should they be? Again, just keep putting into practice. It's easy to do, you know, little sketches and designs. I often find it's important as part of the process to really just go in there and try and put everything together. Just want him to be he was looking a bit skinny. He had like a nice chunkiness in the original sketch illustration thing. All right. So we've got sort of like, I guess, like a bit of an arc going here, right? That kind of works. Have some sort of motion to this. And I'm imagining that the tree that this branch is on is kind of over here. So this branch sort of gets bigger, right? a little bit as it heads towards. Alright, and again, we could put that sort of tree in there. Again, that might help us get, right, like a bit of a motion that way, or again, so we can sort of use that tree a little bit. Hard to say, or it could just be sort of, much more sort of abstract, right? Have some other branches. Because I like the idea that it's kind of a little bit sort of hidden, right? Again, that's similar to that first one we were looking at, right? Maybe some sort of other leaves there, something like that. So again, this becomes more of like a framing thing, right? So we're losing the motion there, but I feel like it's going to allow us to frame the character a little bit better. Again, looks like horizon line is sort of somewhere here. Be good to play around with that as well. All right, so again, have a sort of a mass for the hip that this little rider guy has. And again, then we've sort of got proportion. Right, stick figure legs. And he's going to be sort of, or maybe he will be sort of more like this, right? Like riding. Get rid of that guy. Right, so we've got a head here. Right, so we've got mass here, mass here. Now we have the torso mass. Right, we sort of join them up. Right. So we can have him sort of let's put this saddle thingy forward. So imagine he kind of really leans over it. Right, got hand here. Again, this is looking pretty messy. And then this arm back here, sort of sitting into space. Again, not for any reason. Maybe it could be a little bit more here. No, I feel it. Again, how big are these hands? Because I don't like the idea of, again, I like this shape back here of the back. Some extra structure to that saddle. Gee, I wonder whether if he's a little bit smaller, that will help. Let's anchor that to the saddle size. Yeah, just feel like just a touch smaller. All right, so that's super rough. But again, often that's, we need to kind of focus on that if we're going to get there quick enough, right? So what I might do is, let's have one more pass at this little creature. See if we can get... I feel like we might save time if I can get... So I've just made that pencil a bit darker in terms of opacity. See if we can do a pass on the character, get it a bit closer. So again, just trying to get all that structure there. Got the leg down here. Right, other leg on the side. Not sure about that here. So again, just playing around with shapes, really. Like in many cases, some of these things are about structure. Some of them are about just about shape. He's sort of hunching down. Got this leg here. Right. So one leg here. One leg here. So again, it's like it's a little bit more of a mix. It's not like horse saddle, right? It's a little bit more like a motorcycle or something. Again, these things change, right? You kind of have an idea, and then it's like, oh yeah, that kind of works, but is it practical? At the moment, I don't really, not too concerned whether it's practical or not. All right. Still feel like that head is too big now. And the reason for the size, to me, like the overall size, I feel like is just if he's too big, it feels like this poor little bird creature is going to get just sort of squashed. Right, there's probably like a good natural size to it, right? And I think a lot of it is like his head needs to be smaller than the bird creature's head. So again, a lot of it is, what do I do with this arm, right? I still don't know. Right, I'm imagining this one is sort of resting on here. It's probably a case where, yeah, I'm sort of reaching the limit of what can be done with this pencil, right? And that is actually a good signal. So that I've kind of set up that stop for myself to say, hey, if you like run out of like runway with this pencil or tool, right? I've got this big sort of silly palette knife style. Again, it gives us some good energy. Once I start hacking away at stuff, you can see it's not very effective, right? It's not accurate, and that's good because I really shouldn't be fussing around here. So when that gets frustrating, it's a good signal that probably I'm doing something wrong. Right, spending too much time. So I think his body is kind of bigger. Body is smaller, head maybe still needs to be bigger, just to match that other. I just want him to be maybe looking at the sort of camera a bit more. He kind of has this sort of big forehead. Right, basically sort of like head is shaped like that. And his ears are like sort of high on his head. And I reckon we can sort of make this whole thing a bit smaller, so he actually fits on. Yeah, so I think I'm just going to have this arm kind of here. Again, doesn't make a lot of sense. Not the best sort of tangent, but and I think that's cool. That will allow me to kind of put this tail out a bit, which I think is a good idea because it kind of just needs to be a bit more elegant. Alright, so let's see if we can make a few more things. Actually specific. So again, I don't need like to, go crazy and, draw all these things with any detail, but, having an idea of where the branches are going to go, why they're going that way, right, where these leaves are, where they're going to overlap, I think is like a good idea. So this one's going over. Right, and we've got some leaves here. And again, some leaves coming down here. Alright. Let's flip that, see if it looks terrible. Yeah, not convinced about the structure of this little guy's face, but what I'll probably do is just sort of erase it, make it a bit more vague. Alright, I think if that comes down, could be a bit better. So just playing with proportion. Maybe I will leave this hand off here. Again, I feel like that's just going to give us a bit more shape, right? I want this, like the saddle, I forget what that thing's called on the saddle. I want that thing to come like overlap, right? And maybe I'll just have him carrying, maybe I'll have him carrying that same hammer he was kind of carrying. Or something similar. Alright, I'm running out of time. Way too much on drawing. Alright, let's flip again. Just thinking about which pencil. I think something like this will probably... I think that'll be alright. Alright, so I'm mainly focused on this. This character, and I'm still, again, I'm doing some structural path stuff. Just because I feel like otherwise it's going to end badly. Alright, got to put this opacity down. That was at sort of 100, and that means I put it down to 60, and that means I can press a little bit harder. Alright, so I'm going to block in the eyes with just two big old sort of circles. Just try and place them, get them sort of equidistant. Over ear. All right. Getting there. Again, abstract shape for that hair. I feel like this pencil might be a bit big. Yeah, I think it is a bit big. I don't really feel like redoing all of that stuff though. redoing a few of these lines so it's not quite so egregious. So again, not entirely sure what's happening there, but this other shoulder here. Alright. I feel like this nose is like was looking a little bit human too. No, I think it looked better like that. And yeah, I think that's a bit better. Again, just bigger forehead. Makes him feel a little bit sort of cuter, more approachable. So again, gonna have to get the simplicity of this down if it's gonna be, again, a quicker, sort of sketchier image, which I think will be okay because I've sort of dealt with that face. But again, just in terms of, like, you know, how much effort we put into those hands and things like that. I feel like his mouth is actually a little bit smaller in that original image. Make it a little bit smaller. Yeah. Actually, it's a bit smaller. And we can move this down. Yeah, that's looking more like it did. So now we've got some sort of thing behind there. So I am looking at there's another version of this up on a monitor up above that I'm sort of checking now and then. It's very hard to stay focused on a monitor this size. It's very easy to mess everything up. Alright, so here we go. Other hand there. All right. All right, and he's got this kind of foot over here. Drawing out whatever is on this back of the saddle here. So again, not a lot of this is super critical, right? So it can be sort of vague, right? You can sort of almost think of like this is sort of sketchy and vague. I'm gonna put a sort of strap on the back of that hammer. Have it flying there. No, we need it. We need good tangent against that tail. Tail is going to go out like this. So again, putting in this stuff, and in many ways I'm kind of hoping for the best to a certain degree. I'm kind of like hoping these things will kind of turn out. But it can be really hard to see what it's all going to look like right at the end, until right at the end. again, as I ink this, I'm kind of noticing that, like, yeah, I'm not fully lined up from a biomechanics perspective, right? I'm like, oh, it's hard to hit lines. Again, just a good sign to move around if that's happening. So again, here we've got some fur. So again, going to leave those open. That's fine. And he's got this little bird tongue. Again, so this is a good example of how, yeah, doing it how I was, where I was trying to get too much happening with that earlier, rougher pencil. It's very easy for me to sort of put in those details now that I've actually got the space. So we're going to have this guy is going to be on this layer with this tree. And then this one is kind of coming out here. Got some leaves here. Again, very unsophisticated leaves. These come straight off the cheap set. Leaves. So it's normally about this time where I start to, if I do start to be like, is this going to be any good? This is when those voices start to happen. Like, is this going to be worth me spending time on it? I'm like, not sure about this face. It's just like again, I was copying it and I feel like I got it close to how that first one that I did was. And I was like, oh, okay, I got it right. Got it close to that one. Now it's really boring and static. Again, that'll be like a executive decision, right? Like, is that worth fighting in this image, or should I do another one? Because it's easy to spend, you know, like an hour or a couple of hours, like fiddling around with that kind of stuff. Whereas, you could just do another image and focus on that. And again, the reason for that is also that, you know, you don't know. Like, it's very hard sometimes to judge that stuff. Might be fine, might not be. It's just like, is that too quick? Probably. And so these leaves are going to be on the layer above. So I'm just going to basically pretend they're not there for the purposes of drawing this branch. Not sure I should go that seriously into any shadows. It's a bit more experimental. That goes there, there. This comes around here. Alright. Not a fan of that. A cleaner line there. So I'm going to put some sort of tone on here. And probably again could do the same here. Trace that back. Had like a real geometric look in the original sketch. All right. You can see sort of a bit more what we've got. Just putting in a bit of that wood tree texture. Alright. So it's all okay except this face, which is still annoying me. So you can easily just sort of duplicate. Can play around with it. Again, I don't know whether it's the shape. It could just be the like general position of it. That maybe again it was just sort of started with those big lines, so it's kind of standing out a little bit more. It might totally be not an issue. What else could it be? Yeah, maybe just this head not sort of big enough. Maybe just this is not fun enough. Yeah, a bit more upbeat. Maybe the eyebrows just don't suit. Alright, let's have another go at this. Just want to keep that shape. simpler. Again, I don't know whether that's any better. Alright, that's probably all the time we've got. Regardless. Again, a lot of these things won't be important. I feel like that's a bit better, right? Right. Yeah, I mean, I feel like it fits what I'm trying to do with this particular image anyway. Have it be a little bit more innocent. That other one was kind of like, I feel like the overall proportion was good, right? So by that I mean, if we get this, right? So this one, I feel like overall proportion was good, but doesn't fit this character, who again is, yeah, different sort of take on that same idea. Alright, so we've got to draw a foreground basically and a background. Start with this background. So basically just got a bunch of different trees and mountains in the background. Had some good stuff happening in the original. Some good quick stuff. Again, another one of these things really tricky to tell, because it can just be a matter of like do a few little bits here and there and all of a sudden this has a lot of sort of depth and interest. All right. And again, gonna be like I'm just making these little abstract marks a little bit bigger, and sort of down here be a similar thing. So I don't need them everywhere, just here and there. Alright. Now that is a very rough background. We'll do foreground above that, which will be a lot of leaves. So again, you can see through this now, but we won't be able to once we're done. So it'll be on a separate layer. And another one here. Branch. Leaf. 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 Those little curly things, again, I don't really know what they are, just breaks things up, adds some extra overlap. Leaf, 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 and here we've got one of these branches. Little branch. Leaf. And maybe another leaf here. Branches. Alright, and leaf, 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 leaf. Again, just framing. It's just going to be basically like shapes. Again, if we were sort of painting, right, these would be kind of like quite, you know, quite sort of rough abstract marks. All right. Let's see what that looks like when we do it. Okay, so let's group and hide all those. turn on contiguous. Boom. Let's get this one. Just making sure we get all these different shapes. So there's multiple ways to, again, to sort of get those flat selections. I'm using a technique here that I often sort of talk about as being not really worth looking at if you're, just sort of figuring out the basics, but it's good to know that you can engage all sorts of efficiencies with align and color style. Because often it feels like some of these things take forever. Again, there's lots of different ways with selections and masking that you can speed up these processes. All right, so I can use the quick mask, use the selections, I can use some actions. We can speed this up. And then we'll do the same thing for this. 1, 2, 3. So selecting all the stuff that I don't want. There we go. And closing all these gaps. Oh, there's one. Obviously that's not going to work. So we've got to close up these open lines here, which again is pretty easy to do, and the effect will be that we have a bit of a mix between open and closed line. Right? But again, I'm just going to fill in a little bit of that. So we get a bit of a better shape there. Bam. There we go. What am I missing? I think that's it. Right. That action again. Let Photoshop do all the boring work. So you can see it. We missed a little bit there. That's okay. All right. And now we had our very simple background. Let's see if we can fill these. What am I missing? Oh yeah, there we go. Bam. Cool. All right. So now we'll see whether we can make it look interesting or not. So first step that I often like to do is just sort of separate, right, foreground, middle ground, and background. I'm not really going to think about colors yet, but we do need to separate because like that background is like way in the distance, right? And then, all right, I can think about a gradient or something. So again, that's basically going to be the value plan. I feel like that's always worthwhile doing. Make this a little bit darker. All right, so that's basically the idea. similar to doing a black and white sort of thumbnail, except I'm doing it now, which is not the way you should do it, but it allows me to sort of adjust that. Now, again, I've done enough of these that I sort of know how that's going to go, right? So it's all okay. All right. So again, all I really need to do now is, all I'm going to do now is just make this into more of a green color as a base. So we're going to start with a green base. So same tonal layout basically. Right, I'm just going to make it green and we'll see how that goes. And that can be more of a more of a blue-green, slightly more. Again, we'll modify all these, but this is just starting that baseline. Now, obviously, this is like a very, I don't want it to be like crazy blue sky. Again, something like that will kind of work. And then the next step that I always sort of look at is, let's just actually check these values, right? Like how light is this? You know, it's pretty light, but it's again only sort of 77. So just gotta remember that, because again, you get a sense for like what the value sort of should be. Again, I want to make sure for sure that a lot of, like, you know, something that should feel light is going to be over that 50% on the value, the balance slider. Because it's all relative, right? You know, if you make everything dark, then the background will still feel lighter than everything else. But what I want to do is sort of set that pretty high in the value. And that will, again, intuitively allow me to kind of modify other stuff. So again, doing super rough. Yeah, I've just got what is basically a round brush, but it's a pencil tool. And I'm just, you know, in a very haphazard way putting in this sort of separation of what is sort of grass, green, trees, and what's I don't know what the other stuff is. I guess mountain, rock, dirt, earth. Again, just simple two-tone. But building it up like that, again, it gives me a little bit of texture and stuff, right? Still got a little bit of vibrancy there. Again, I feel like that's sort of interesting. Now, probably like something that's might be worth doing is just doing some of the boring stuff in the foreground first too. And that's really just about separating out the trees and the tree leaves and the tree wood. The branches, the bark. Again, I keep calling it wood. It's like not really wood until it's kind of dead in my mind. Alright. So again, you can see that's very, very basic, right? But that's probably all we'll need. Alright, now same sort of thing here. We'll just make this a bit lighter because it's slightly more in the midground. just going to do the similar thing. Now these leaves are not looking very bright, are they? We'll see what that looks like in a minute. Again, build it up slowly. Bit by bit, make decisions as we go. See what happens. Because I mean, the good thing about these leaves is that they're not going to sort of stand out. So I might just kind of try and hit a few with a slightly greener color. Yeah, again, that's probably all we got time for. Alright, gonna make a new layer, try and get this creature on there. And again, I'm not going to worry about the so I'm basically drawing a big old circle, right, as a layer above, but it's obviously hooked that one underneath, right? So it all sort of works, but that will mean, again, I can do some better color selections because I've got this on a separate layer. So I'm just gonna, again, just get that separated out. Now this bit I'm just doing by hand, right? I don't have this creature separated out on a separate layer. If it was a really complicated thing and a very, very, high polish illustration, I for sure would have that thing on a separate layer. Because the more layers you can have, the easier it is to do color adjustments and all that stuff in the end. Alright. So if we sort of zoom out, you can see that's roughly the idea. Now, again, I've got that on its own layer, so I can control U and I can adjust that sort of saturation or balance, which I think is, I think it needs to be a bit more sort of orange, right? I'm thinking more like that. More like with this. Right, this is kind of the under. Right, so he's got sort of two-tone. There we go. Oh, and I need to lock transparency. So press question mark key. That'll lock transparency of your layer in Photoshop. Now this is, again, the beak is like really orange. So I'm just going to put in some of this stuff and then I'll adjust it. Because again, it's very hard to tell with relative colors. Right? Is it too red? Is it not red enough? Is it this? Is it that? All right. I feel like that maybe is a bit. It's a bit. Yeah, I think that's a better contrast. All right. So the trick now is like, well, how? Right? Should it be more saturated? Darker, maybe? Right? Like, are they in the shadow? I think it'll always be possible to pull it back. Yeah, I think a bit more yellow. I think maybe this stuff in the background is like a bit saturated. So let's pull that back. Yeah, again, I can always make it like, a little bit more bright. And I can always make this whole thing a lot darker. So I'm like, gotta remember, I can adjust all of those things. So again, another thing I'll probably do is try and pick his color. And again, he's green, but I can sort of go on what else is green in the scene. And I sort of have his color scheme a little bit sorted out from that previous illustration. Actually, let's get like red first, then we'll put those in. That means again we often get that little bit of red surrounding that. Tends to work well. Let's put in, actually first what I'm going to do is block in this. Let's see if I can find a good color. Here we go. Just going to put this in. Now again, I sort of didn't give him the obligatory blanket. Oh man, why is that doing that? Oh, I know. Yeah, there we go. So again, that's separating out that stuff. And now it's a little bit easier to separate out his green. Go. All right. feel like, yeah, make that a bit darker. Yep. And now we'll make some of these things a little bit darker. Got the pants here. So again, pretty rough. This is always where you sit, you know, I'm like, oh man, should have put more detail in there with the lines. But again, then we would be spending a lot more time on everything. All right. So you can see again, it's starting to come together. All right, probably enough. All right, so just go through and do a little bit of cleanup, right? Just sort of zoom in here and look at, like, is anything really sort of messy? There's a couple of sort of messy bits and pieces here. Again, some of it doesn't really matter. Now, these colors are a bit what I would consider sort of day glow colors, right? They're a bit rough. And again, the image feels kind of a little bit flat in a bad way, right? And what to me that means is it kind of feels a little bit sort of like a coloring book or something, that there's not a lot of sophistication or sort of realism to the colors. They're very different. Now the first thing I'll do is just kind of play around and do the obvious things that I would normally do, which is sort of start to separate out some of these elements. Oh, don't want to flip. So I've just put a layer above this stuff, right? And that means I can fade out this background. Actually, but I want to do it with the lighter colors. All right, make it brighter. Now again, this is basically just atmospheric perspective. All right, a bit of that blue sky. Again, that might be a bit much. But the idea here is we're just pushing that. We're pushing that away from us. And I would normally, again, just kind of play around with a similar thing, but with texture. Again, this just gives it a little bit of noise, a little bit of variety there. So it, again, just gets rid of that flatness. So same thing here. Before we sort of color adjust this or anything, we can just sort of try, if we kind of just add some atmosphere, right? So all I'm really doing is just I'm just pushing, again, this sort of, where did I get that from? Yeah, just the tree. I'm just sort of taking the tree I'm just putting it everywhere, and just a little bit. So if you turn it off, right, it's just sort of, it's making it all darker and pushing it together. And that's why, again, I probably prefer to put in brighter colors to begin with, because if we always push them down, it's a little bit, it's very easy to sort of get that, push that down, make it darker. Right. And again, I'm going to sort of make it a little bit darker over here. And I've done that on a separate layer so that I can turn that down, right, turn that off. But yeah, I want to sort of focus on this area. Now, again, these ones, so just make a new layer in that layer stack. So I'm not going to be doing any rendering or anything. Let's make that a darker color. So again, same idea. Going to make these foreground colors a little bit darker. And again, that's something I can kind of tone down if I want. So the next thing is to try putting a bit of this sort of atmosphere right between the foreground and midground. Again, tricky to know how. I'm going to start with sort of super low opacity and just see what happens if I kind of just put some everywhere. So again, it makes it feel as if there's quite a bit of atmosphere between the foreground and that midground, right? Which I think kind of works on a really sort of basic level. Again, just thinking. And again, this is where it can be good, right? We can turn these off. No, I think, again, having that basic separation. So this basic separation is good. We're working the hierarchy of detail. What we need to play around with next is just kind of thinking about pulling the focus a little bit towards the middle. Now, again, your simple trick, probably not for a, like a fancy big illustration, but just for something like this, right? You know, the easiest trick is that we just basically vignette what's going on. All right, so vignette things. That just means, again, in this instance, it sort of means we're putting a darker light around, like a darker rim around everything. Again, you see that same tone being used, in sort of Instagram and other filter, quote unquote, filter apps, right? Where they're like, the vignette just puts like a dark sort of border on everything, which sort of draws your eye in. So again, I feel like, from a visual hierarchy point of view, that's kind of interesting. That's sort of working. I feel like it's good. All right, put some of that sort of texture there as well. Again, that feels like quite a lot. I'm just going to take it back here and there. The other thing I'm going to do is try and put some darker texture as well. So that's really texturing it up, which is probably more than we need. So new layer, try again doing the same grading thing but with texture as well. And I can push some of that texture onto the foreground as well, which will, again, just it's going to make it feel a little bit more like there's something going on when there's really not. Alright. Play around again with where that focus is going to be. So this is where, again, we can sort of zoom out. Yeah, I'm not sure that's really helping anything too much. So here's where we can play around with tweaking some of these colors a little bit. So again, just going to push the warm, cool sort of contrast. Let's make and really like just giving it an interesting, you know, like pulling the colors together, like homogenizing the colors will make things a little bit more interesting to begin with, right? Giving it some sort of warm colors. So I give it a warm base to begin with. It probably wasn't warm enough. And then I'll sort of cool it down a bit. Right, so already, again, that's like a slightly more interesting. So if we make that sort of like a really soft gradient, right, and pick those darks. Again, that's going to give it a really sort of graphic, crunchy look. Not sure that's really going to work that well. So again, I feel like that's maybe squashing those foreground elements a little bit too much. I think maybe that could just be because there's a bit too much of that sort of darkness on the foreground. Maybe you don't need that much. Another thing that I feel like often sort of work is if we again run a grade. You can see I did this on the previous one, right? Just to give, like, homogenize the image. Again, gives it like a nice sort of warm look. Now, we could pull that away from the background as well. So if we sort of select everything and then minus the foreground and middle ground, right? If we invert that, so that's kind of what we've got there. Again, that's kind of cool. So what I might try and do is like blend that look, right? So let's reduce that to 30. See, I think that's a little bit more interesting, right? Turn it off. Yeah, so I feel like let's not have it over here, right? I don't want it. I don't really need it back there. Right, don't really need it in the foreground either, right? We sort of want it here. So we can try it. Similar, I'm finding myself doing similar things to what I did in that last image, right? So I feel like that Birdfox guy, yeah. No, I feel like these characters need to be like, yeah, dark against light. Right, that's what's going to make it work. I mean, it's like, duh. But again, you got to always worth playing around, right? Got that one, that one, that one, that one. There we go. So I'm just doing overlay with black, right? Which is not the most sophisticated way of bringing something down. But you can see that feels a lot more solid to me. Sorry, turn that off, right? Turn that on. Again, just getting those sort of nice shapes that we worked. Now, you can tell here again, right? There's like a lot of that texture, maybe too much. So, there you go, there's that texture. Let's see if we can just dial that back a bit. There we go. Or maybe just sort of from over there. I feel like we don't need it there. It's really coming into the, it's like distracting. Yeah. It kind of works in the leaves a bit, right? Let's pull that back. So this is where, again, we can start playing around with, right? Playing around with things. No, I feel like that still works well. So one of the things I'm losing again is, yeah, that's, can we get some of that color in there? So kind of let me get that. Yeah, that's interesting. Why is that? So yeah, I still want it to be blue, but I want to be able to see more of that, again, that contrast in the background. That's starting to be a bit eye bleedy. I think that's better. Again, you can just see the contrast in, like, you can see the silhouette of that in the distance. feel like we don't now that this texture up the top here is really showing through. Don't need that there. All right. Let's see, so this was black set to overlay. Maybe if I just pull, I just feel like I'm losing a bit of detail here and there, right, in this. If I pull some of these out, right, don't need quite that much contrast there. And again, there's other ways that I can, right, there's other ways that I can get that contrast back. So I'm just focusing on, right, I want the silhouette to still be dark, but as we come down here, I want a bit more contrast between like the arm overlapping this thing, for instance. And internally here, I don't need that sort of harsh silhouette. And also now that I've lightened up that background, right, again, I don't need him to read quite as harsh against the background. All right. So let's try again pushing that warm, cool. Right, we've got our neutrals. Right, we can push that yellow. So I'm looking at both monitors, right? This this one that I'm actually working on and recording on is a cheapest Wacom Cintiq, and doesn't have a high dynamic range, but I have one, the other one does, that I'm looking at. So that is kind of part of the thing I'm looking at, is here I'm not seeing those reds kind of overexposed, but on the other one it's really easy to see. So see if I can, yeah, probably don't need everything to be that yellow. Yeah, I think that works, all right. What about if we do levels? Always fun to see what auto levels tells us. Auto levels says you can push that further. I don't know. That looks pretty contrasty on some of the monitors I've got. So yeah, no, I don't think that's gonna solve it for us. Right, so I feel like, again, one of the things here is we just got like I'm gonna use big airbrush with low opacity, because I feel like we just kind of like crunched some of these things together a little bit, and just losing subtlety, right? Like the foreground just feels like one big chunky sort of mess of value. Right, just feels a bit too flat. So I'm just sort of thinking like, well, if we put a bit of atmosphere there, again, especially where we don't want things to be in focus. That might help. Again, we'll see. probably running out of time to play around. I mean, I think that's sort of what I was trying to do. I was like, I need to play around with, again, drawing this character and see if I can get them looking, you know, interesting with that combo. I was like, well, what would happen if I changed the little guy riding on that thing? Would that be more interesting, less interesting? Was that design that I had there to begin with, was that okay? Who knew? So again, just a quick experiment. So just trying to rough this up a bit again. So I'm just putting a bunch of stuff everywhere. I'm going to reduce the opacity of this, or just erase out. But again, just there we go. All right, yeah, I think that's all we got time for. Again, not sure where to put this. I think it just has to go over here. Yeah, so again, that's basically what I think I kinda wanted to do in the beginning. Just create a bit of space for that. Just play around with that character, get them there in the scene. And if we sort of look at this versus the other one, you can see again, I feel like it has a lot better appeal in terms of, probably not as good of a, I feel like this had a little bit more care in taken to the whole thing, but I feel like, again, that feels a little bit more like the character has more appeal. It's more interesting. It's kind of working better. So yeah, anyway, that's it. I fiddled around with the colors as much as I can. And yeah, anyway, so hopefully that's been interesting, seeing me attack this image and play around with it. So probably a 2-hour image in the end, something like that, a little bit over. And probably, yeah, if I was to do it again, I would probably, yeah, not worry so much about playing around with that initial really sort of sketchy version. I think it would be better to probably jump into this and just sort of hack away at it a little bit, right? If I need to mess up the lines a bit, that's kind of okay. As you saw, it's kind of possible to do that. That kind of works. There's nothing really sort of wrong with that if you're only going for a fairly sketchy look anyway. Yeah, so again, if you are interested in this type of image, where we're just dealing with line and color, go check out that quick start guide. It has most of the tricks that I'm using here, and you can, again, get access to all the brushes and those things that I've used here in this image. But other than that, happy drawing. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you later.